Climate change is going to have a very big impact on how we live our lives. Yeah. Can we travel? Can we move around? Where can we live? Depending on the rising oceans and so. Biodiversity is going to decide whether we live at all. So my name is Schillebeeckx. I'm an assistant professor of strategy and entrepreneurship at Singapore Management University. As part of my research on innovation in the natural world, I ended up co-founding a non-profit organization back in 2018 called Global Mangrove Trust that works on mangrove restoration. And a year later, at the end of 2019, as part of kind of an outflow of what we were doing with Global Mangrove Trust, I also ended up co-founding a for-profit social enterprise, which is called Handprint. I'd say the pivotal moment in that journey really dates back to a trip we did, we being myself and Ryan Merrill, my co-founder in the two ventures. We were going to Myanmar, to the Bay of Bengal, to interview and write a case study, an academic case study on Worldview International Foundation. Working alongside and kind of talking to the people from Worldview, specifically at the time, I think 78-year-old Norwegian man, Arne Fjørtoft, who was the executive secretary. I think the most influential time during that stay was really a meeting we had with him where he showed us two graphics of two different phenomena. One was the historical deforestation that had happened in this area in Ayeyurwadi or something very hard to pronounce, and something that they were trying to combat. And then another graph which relates to Cyclone Nargis, which is a cyclone that hit the Bay of Bengal in Myanmar in 2008, and killed almost 138,000 people. So it's one of the largest natural disasters of the last hundreds of years. And it's not as well known, of course, as the tsunami. And the tsunami killed 250,000 people in many different countries. But this was a massive natural disaster that had an enormous impact on human life. And what was striking was that the areas where the mangroves had been cut were the areas where most people had died. And I think for both Ryan and I, that story really hit us, I think, pretty hard. We don't just want to be passive observers anymore. We want to do something. And that led to the foundation of Global Mangrove Trust, and then later on the foundation of Handprint. I had no interest at all in becoming an entrepreneur, but I was dragged into it. So Handprint really there is in that kind of framing. So footprint is the sum of all your negative impact. Handprint is the sum of all your positive impact. It's a scientific concept which was launched by a professor from MIT, and we just adopted it and turned it into a company name, but the concept existed. And we are, of course, very much encouraging companies to start thinking not just about their footprint and how to reduce it, but also about their handprint and how to grow it. So the original thesis of Handprint has not really changed over the last 6-7 years. So the idea was, how do we identify, source, monitor, and validate very high quality impact projects across a wide variety of impact types: mangrove restoration, coral restoration, ocean plastic cleanup, access to education, food, water, energy, like the whole sustainable development. So that was one thing. And then how do we help companies capture value from this? And our central thesis really became that companies can capture value from the creation of positive impact in the world if they can embed this commitment into how they interact with their customers. And so by doing that, the company would actually tell the customer something that, hey, we are doing something nice for the world, for whatever, for people. And we're doing this at a moment when we are interacting with you in the hope that this is going to change your behavior. Right? And so one of our very early stage kind of successful implementations of this was in e-commerce. So we worked with an Australian company, a sports brand, and they integrated this kind of capability into their checkout process. Right, so you have a sports store that has a checkout that says, hey, if you're buying today, we are gonna give some money to tree planting. And what was great with them is that we could set it up as an A/B test, a classic thing you do in design to figure out which design is more successful. Right? And so we ran it for 2 weeks. But we ran 50% through the original website, 50% of visitors to the enhanced website, between brackets, where you had a tree counter on the front page and where you had a message that said, like, if you're buying this product, we are donating, or we're giving 1%, or I think it was 1%, to reforestation in Australia. And we found 16% increase in sales on the website where the tree planting plugin was implemented. And for that company, that meant that for every $1 they spent on planting trees, they had $6 additional revenue. So this was a very strong proof point that this can really work. All right, so I think my focus as an entrepreneur and as a professor is really on SDG 13, 14, and 15, right? So climate, life on land, life in water. And so biodiversity, nature, and then the climate question. Now, I think it's very hard to disentangle those from other sustainable development goals. Right? So, of course, the energy one, SDG 7, has a very big impact on climate. But even a lot of the work that needs to be done to better protect biodiversity, to better protect nature, to better protect the climate, cannot be done if we are not improving education, if we don't ensure that people have access to sanitation, if we don't improve gender equality. So the things are complex and they're very much intertwined. But it's true that as a matter of personal interest and professional activity, I'm very much on the, I would say broadly, the nature side. So SDGs 13, 14, and 15. The most urgent thing that we need to consider right now is the existential risk that bees might not be around anymore in a couple of years. If we really think about, like, what is the most urgent thing that is going to have the biggest impact on life on this planet, I would say it's bees. We also need to do a lot of other things. Many, let's say, natural scientists are saying climate change is going to have a very big impact on how we live our lives. Can we travel? Can we move around? Where can we live? Depending on the rising oceans and so. Biodiversity is going to decide whether we live at all. So I think it is very different for organizations and individuals, right? So let me say something very controversial. What individuals do doesn't matter. Right? A lot of the narrative around, like, individual carbon footprint and all of that kind of stuff is really narrative coming from the oil and gas industry that we somehow have adopted. What we do as an individual doesn't matter. What we do as a collective makes all the difference. If I decide to do something, whatever it is, right, it doesn't matter. But if I decide to do something and I can convince 2 other people to do the same, and these people will also convince 2 other people, and on and on and on, within about 30 iterations, you've changed the mind of 1 billion people. So people can do very small things, of course, like use recyclable stuff and all of that. But in the grand scheme of things, if it is hard to do for individuals, we're not going to do it. I think this is the reality. It's much too hard to move enough people to change their mind, especially if it's going to cost them more. Right? So the powerful actors are truly companies. I think it's absolutely necessary for companies to start expanding how they think about environmental responsibility and embrace also an obligation to do something good for the world. Not just trying to be less bad, but also saying we can do something positive, we can do something really good. And as the example of the e-commerce store, and we have other examples with Handprint, shows if you do this in a way that is smart and that actually informs your customers, some customers will care about this. Very few people will be turned off by this. So it's unlikely to harm. It is very likely to create positive feelings with a subset of your customers. So it's likely to actually be good for business. And this is, I think, a trend we need to start seeing very quickly if we want to get to anywhere close to meeting the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, because we need a lot more money for that. I think it's hard. So my wife and I, we have 2 kids. We have the good fortune of being able to afford full-time help, as many people in Singapore. And as a consequence, life, right? Washing clothes, making food, picking up the kids from school, like all of these things are really easily outsourced. And that gives us more time to work on my career and on my wife's career and maybe travel and all of that. But so in a culture like Singapore, it's super hard if you want to have this balance. On the other hand, I think it's also very important to make sure that you have some time. So for us, typically the Sunday is family day. My wife and I try to at least eat a couple of days per week together. She doesn't have to work late or I don't have to work late. But it's incredibly hard if you have 2 people who are very career driven. And I would say typically when people ask me like, how do you combine all of those things? I say poorly as the honest answer. Because I just think it is very hard. And anyone claiming that they've really nailed this, like, please come talk to me. I don't know how to do that in Singapore. I think in other countries where you just have a much more tolerant culture, it would be a bit easier. There's just no expectation that you can just take off. That's weird. Make sure you love your work so you don't really feel like it's too much of a painful thing to do. Because if you're going to be based in Singapore, you're going to spend a lot of time working. So, but I think you follow your passion, you follow, something that you deeply believe in. And in doing so, you probably need to be a little bit stubborn. And at some point that might become recognized as something that's valuable. There's a quote that started my dissertation from George Bernard Shaw, an economist. And it's something like this, I'm paraphrasing here. It said, reasonable people try to adapt themselves to the environment. Unreasonable people try to adapt the environment to themselves. That is why all progress depends on unreasonable people. But if you really want to do something meaningful in this field, you have to be unreasonable. Because you basically have to believe that whatever everyone else is doing is not good enough. And so you have to be a little bit unreasonable and then just try to put things in motion the best way you can. And I would say not be daunted too much by the grand vision and the grand ambition. I think start with something tangible, pursue something that is really achievable, but puts you in that right direction, and then take it from there, step by step. There's a famous Australian comedian who once gave a commencement speech. He said, like, as one of the first pieces of advice he gave to graduating students, it's like, don't have big dreams. Big dreams are for Americans. Right? Pursue your passion in small and incremental steps. Right? You're much more likely to be successful and happy rather than chasing that one big dream. And it always struck me like, it's actually quite a good way of thinking about it. I don't refer to high-speed internet in this case. So the 5 Gs are like 5 words starting with G that I kind of keep in the back of my mind, especially when I do things like meditation or stuff like that. So it's, let me see if I can still remember that. Grace, gratitude, growth, generosity, and grit. So 5 Gs. And I think these are all kind of reasonably important characteristics or maybe kind of ambitions in life for anyone who wants to change things. Like grit would arguably be the most important. It's number 5 in the list here, but I'd say grit is the most important. You have to be determined, you have to persevere, you have to really try and do something, otherwise it's because you're gonna face so many obstacles. And so but growth in terms of a mindset, I think if you really wanna change things in the world, you need to have that growth mindset, that growth ambition. Then I think generosity isn't necessarily about giving money away, but you need to be willing to be generous with your time and with what you have to offer, because I think most things that are worth changing are time-consuming and difficult, and you never know what conversation or which meeting is going to be the one that is going to take you to the next level. So you have to kind of place a lot of random bets in terms of, I'm going to make this small investment to go to this event, to say yes to this meeting, to do this. I don't think it's going to be very interesting, but at some point maybe it will be. So grace, I think in grace and gratitude go well together, but in terms of, I think as a mindset, to be also grateful, because people like us living in Singapore, one of the wealthiest countries on earth, incredibly safe, everything works. Like, it's easy for us, relatively speaking, to try to change things and think like, oh, we need to change what's going on in other parts of the world. Very, very few of us like, oh, there's so much stuff we need to change in Singapore. No, stuff works well here. We have we live in an incredible luxury that we have the capacity to think about what should be changed in the world, right? And so I think being reflexive of that and recognizing that you can't expect everyone else in the world to have the same position, to see things the same way, because people grow up in very different environments, is useful. Because very often when we face obstacles to change, or when you're trying to convince companies or people or that they should do one thing or another, it's easy to forget that maybe in their kind of cultural or historical background, what I'm asking them to do is insane. And so recognizing this is part of graciousness and gratitude that we need to have.